Hello everyone and welcome. Today we're going to be playing some Legacy Magic the Gathering, and we're going to be running through a league with Sneak and Show. I have not played this deck in a couple of weeks. Been taking a little bit of a break from it, but this deck is still fine. This deck is still positioned pretty well in the Legacy metagame. When you're talking about a field that's full of Grixis control, blue-white control, and miracles, you are pretty much favored as the control deck. Grixis is a little bit worse, but you're definitely a favorite against Miracles. Outside of that, Reanimator is not great, so Reanimator is a matchup that you are really hoping to avoid. We're going to pull up our metagame here real quick. So, like I said, Grixis, you're favored. Miracles, you're favored. Lands, you're favored. The matchups where you get to be a little bit iffy are the decks after that. Death Shadow, Death and Taxes, Grixis Delver. Those are the three that you're a little bit suspect against. But this deck is all about trying to find a good matchup. This deck is definitely a metagame deck if you're running it, if those are the control decks you're planning on facing against. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to run this through our league, and this is the deck we are going to be playing. As far as your main deck, you're playing the standard 4-4-4-4 build. 4 Show and Tell, 4 Sneak Attack, 4 Gristlebrand, and 4 Emrakul, along with 2 Omniscience. Those are your main ways you're going to be winning the game. As far as your counter magic in the main deck, you have Force of Wills, 3 Spell Pierce, and 1 Flusterstorm to protect yourself, as well as a pile of the 12 best cantrips in Legacy to try and assemble your combo. Your sideboard pretty much is going to be anti-hate cards. You have Blood Moon, well, not necessarily anti-hate cards, but you're going to try and improve some of your matchups where you have a little bit of trouble. One card this deck does have an issue with is Ensnaring Bridge, so we are playing 2 Abrades and 1 Echoing Truth. As far as your control matchups, you have 2 Defense Grid and a Bosaiju who shelters all to make your Show and Tells uncounterable. And then you also have some insurance against Reanimator. There are 3 Grafdigger's Cage, which are a necessary, definitely a necessary card to have in the sideboard. The Reanimator matchup can be very difficult sometimes, so that is probably, that and Death and Taxes are the 2 that you really are hoping to avoid. Other than that, we are going to go hop in our league here, and we're going to see how it goes. Alright, let's see what we're playing against here in the first round. Our hand is not great. I mean, our hand's okay if we find a land, but we do not have any cantrips to look for it. We are on the play. The fact that we're on the play, I think we're going to keep this hand. We get to play a Flooded Strand. We get to avoid a Wasteland the first turn. We have a Force of Will and a Spell Pierce to protect ourselves. So I think this is definitely worth keeping. We are going to, like I said, we are going to need to find that land here in the first, hopefully the first couple draw steps. But if we don't, cantrip would do just fine. I'm going to hold on to this Flooded Strand right now. We're not going to sacrifice it. We don't want to leave ourselves vulnerable to a Wasteland if we don't have to. And also keeping up a Flooded Strand can make our opponent think that maybe we're playing Miracles. I mean, obviously once we play this Ancient Tomb, the jig is going to be up. Very few decks play Blue and Ancient Tomb outside of Sneak and Show, so next turn they are going to know what we're playing. Island Delver. Okay. Island Delver is interesting. Most Delver decks do not play basic Island. Okay, well, we drew our land, so that is good. I am going to not fetch still. We still really do not want to get Wastelanded. That Thoughtseize is going to be really good, though. Okay, this I will spell pierce. We're not going to blow a force of will on this, and if they look at our hand right now, they're going to thought seize this Emrakul out of our hand. Alright, they got it, I guess. So odds are they're going to take this Emrakul. Next turn, we get to play a sneak attack. And if they have a daze or a force of will, we have a second sneak attack that we get to follow it up with. Yes, they did take the Emrakul, but we did draw another one, which is nice. Alright, so let's see what they say about our sneak attack. They do not have a counterspell, which is good news for us. So it looks like our opponent is just playing Grixis Delver, but they're playing a basic island in their deck. Alright, so we are lucky, so we get to activate our sneak attack here. Put in our Emrakul, and I would like to annihilate your board, please. You can sacrifice 6 permanents. And our opponent will be going to 1. And we will pass the turn. Alright, no creature for us yet to follow up with, but we have plenty of time. I will play this island now. Now we can hardcast our Force of Wills. Alright, there's our Gristlebrand. And alright, there it is. Our opponent scoops him up. Alright, game 2 we go. Alright, so we're playing against Grixis Delver. We would like our Pyroclasms, and we would like our Abrades. Jace is going to be too slow. Blood Moon is not great, especially on the draw. We do not want Echoing Truth. We're not going to bring in Grafdigger's Cage. So our only other consideration here is if we want to bring in the defense grids. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the Omniscience here. Omniscience really isn't for this matchup. You can beat your opponent with a Gristlebrand or an Emrakul. Omniscience is more for either the control matchups or Death and Taxes. So the 2 Omniscience can go. And generally the other way you sideboard with this deck is a lot of times you can either trim a Gristlebrand, trim an Emrakul, or you can trim a sneak attack. Generally you're playing the trim game here. If you're playing against something like Control, a lot of times I'll cut the Lotus Petals. You generally don't need the speed of the Lotus Petal, but against something like Delver I'll probably keep them here. But I think we're going to keep all the creatures. We could just cut 2 Lotus Petals. I mean, if we bring in the defense grids, that'll be 6 cards, and we could just cut the 4 petals, which isn't unreasonable. We're going to be trying to slow ourselves down, bringing in the defense grid and bringing in the removal. So our game plan is not going to be quite as fast. So I think cutting the Lotus Petals here is going to make a lot of sense. And we will submit like that. This hand... So we don't have a red source, but we do have an island ponder for our opener, so we're going to keep this hand. If we can find something off of this ponder, we can jam a turn 2 show and tell in theory if we need to. Now, our opponents showed that they have Spell Pierce in their deck, so that is one thing we do want to be mindful of. I would strongly prefer that they don't Spell Pierce this ponder, but alright, so they did give it to us. I am going to keep this. We're going to put Island back first. We'll put the Brainstorm on, and then we'll draw that next turn to protect it, just in case they want to Thoughtseize us or cast like a Hymn to Turok or something like that. But that Brainstorm will be good. It'll let us get rid of some of these extra lands. Okay, our opponent is casting their own Brainstorm. They do not have a fetch land to go with it. So we're going to hold on to this Brainstorm right now. They're representing the Spell Pierce pretty hard here. Okay, but I will respond to this young Pyromancer. Alright, so this looks like... This looks like we're going to put back Ancient Tomb. Probably double Ancient Tomb. Okay, so Pyromancer is going to resolve. The Scalding Tarn will allow us to shuffle and find a basic mountain. And we also get to play around days here, which is nice. Okay, so let's see what they do here. At least next turn. Next turn we'll have the ability to play Show and Tell with Spell Pierce backup. Alright, so they decided not to do anything on their turn. So we're not going to be in a big rush to play the Show and Tell until they tap a little bit of mana. So I think what we're going to do here is just play Island and say go. We're under no pressure, so there's no reason to play into their counter magic. That Brainstorm is fine. Okay, they did find a fetch land. Force of Will is a nice draw. So, we might lead with a sneak attack here. If we just play sneak attack, we're going to have 2 mana left, so we can pay for a Spell Pierce. We can pay for a daze. Or I guess the alternative is to play show and tell. The only thing I think that they're going to really get us with here is if they have a force of will, we're going to be forced to force back. So I think that's going to be the plan here. I think we're just going to lead on the sneak attack and see what they do. Okay, so they do have the force of will. So I am going to force and pitch Spell Pierce. That way this also leaves us with show and tell next turn if this does not work. Okay, so they have a Pyroblast. Sure. That is fine. So now next turn, hopefully we have the coast clear to resolve the show and tell. They are surgical extracting our sneak attacks. That is perfectly okay. Now they know our hand, so they know we're going to be casting a show and tell next turn. I mean, we're going to cast it. Let's see if they have another Pyroblast or something like that. They have another Force of Will. Okay. There is nothing we were doing about that. These are the hands that are very difficult to beat out of Delver. When they have multiple disruption spells. No, we could draw a Pyroclasm. If we draw a Pyroclasm here, we can at least kill this Gurmag Angler. So that is something. Nope. Alright, so we get one more draw step here. Alright, game 3 we go. I don't think we're changing anything. I mean, we didn't see anything in this game that made us really want to change our plan. We know they have counter magic. We know they have discard spells. But that's not really changing the way that we're playing our game. I mean, you could maybe bring in Boseiju. But if you bring in Boseiju, you're probably cutting... I'm going to say you're probably cutting like an Ancient Tomb. We could probably get away with cutting a basic island. Alright, that seems fine. Normally I don't bring in Boseiju against the Delver decks, but we'll give it a shot. Alright, this hand's fine. I mean, this Ponder needs to find us some action, but... And action it did find. Alright, so we're going to put back the land first. And I think we're going to hide the sneak attack on top. I guess the only concern is if our opponent just leads on a Thoughtseize. I mean, if they Thoughtseize us, they're going to take whichever one of these is in our opening hand. So I think we're going to draw the Thoughtseize, or draw the sneak attack here. Okay, Volcanic Island is fine. We're going to play our Polluted Delta. That way we can shuffle away that land that was on top of our deck that we don't need. We're going to wait a turn here on the show and tell. There's no reason to play into a daze if you don't need to. So the fact that they have a wasteland makes it kind of interesting. I might draw this land that's on the top of our deck now. Because if we just untap and show and tell, there could be a window where we might need that second red source. If we play sneak attack, if they wasteland or volcanic island. Yeah, so I think I'm actually going to draw this land that's on top. There's definitely a real possibility that we need access to the second red. Alright, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to play Show and Tell first. If Show and Tell resolves, we can put in Sneak Attack and attack this turn. I mean, I don't think this is going to happen. Yeah, it was unlikely that they were tapping out there without having a Force of Will, which is fine. I mean, we assume that they had it, so... Alright, so they're going to attack us for 3. Presumably, we're going to get wastelanded here. Yep. Another Emrakul was not ideal. Alright, so we're taking 3. And our opponent is just passing a turn, which is kind of scary. If they're just sitting there with 5 cards in their hand and they're not doing anything, that could be a very bad sign for us. Alright, so we're going to do the same thing here. Now that we drew the show and tell, we are just going to cast the show and tell. Okay, so they're going to brainstorm. At least this way, if we draw another land next turn, we can play sneak attack with the ability to activate it in the same turn. So they have another Pyroblast. That defense grid would have been nice a couple turns ago. Unfortunately here, we are going to have to just play the sneak attack and cross our fingers. We do not have the luxury of time on our hands. Oh, and they had another Force of Will. Alright, yeah, we were never winning that game. Not unless we had that defense grid a lot earlier. Alright, we're going to go to game 2. Alright, opponent, let's go, please. This opening hand is fine. It's nothing special, but it's fine. So it looks like we're on the draw. Basic Forest go. I mean, there aren't a whole lot of basic forests in Legacy. So we're looking for a show and tell or a sneak attack, and that is none of these. I mean, I kind of want the ponder. That way next turn we can ponder and preordain next turn. It's not great, but it's probably better than taking a random draw. Looks like our opponent is playing Enchantress. Alright, so we're going to shuffle away that card that's on top of our deck that we do not want. They don't play Wasteland, so we're free to get a Volcanic Island now. Let's start with a... We're going to start with a Preordain. We do not want Force of Will, and we definitely don't want another Emrakul. We did not want that Volcanic Island either. So we're going to ponder. Okay, so we did find our show and tell. So we're going to want the show and tell next turn. So I guess we're going to draw a Spell Pierce here. Our opponent is playing their Enchantress, which is fine. We will cast our Show and Tell. And I would like to put this Omniscience into play. The one way they can get us here is if they have a Banishing Light. Yep, exactly what they have. The problem is even if you put in Banishing Light, they're still going to get your Emrakul. That's one thing that's tough about this matchup, is if you go to cast a Show and Tell, any Banishing Light or Oblivion Ring will get whatever you're putting into play. So even if we put in the Emrakul, it didn't matter. So our opponent got their own Emrakul, so now that gives them some protection from Show and Tell. Alright, so we are looking to draw a sneak attack. Okay, there is a sneak attack. This will allow us to shuffle away island. Probably island Emrakul. Yes. This way, the Scalding Tarn will let us shuffle. We can get our last Volcanic Island out of the deck. And then next turn, we get to play Sneak Attack and have 2 activations in the same turn. Okay, yes, you can have that. Wild Growth is perfectly fine. Enchantress Presence is perfectly okay. One of the cards I was a little worried about there is if they play an Elephant Grass. We're not going to have enough mana to attack through an Elephant Grass right now. Fortunately for us, they did not have it. Utopia Sprawl is fine. We don't care about that one. And they're passing the turn. So our opponent is going to be taking some damage this next turn. So we get to play our Sneak Attack and have 2 activations available. And that is 22 damage. Okay, game 2 we go. Alright, so out of Enchantress, they're not playing any counter magic, so we do not need Boseiju, we do not need Defense Grid, we do not need Grafdigger's Cage. We will bring in Echoing Truth. We will bring in Pyroclasms. They can definitely have Containment Priest in their sideboard. Or there's the, I can't think of the name right now off the top of my head, but there's the enchantment that prevents all damage, so that's a reason to bring in Echoing Truth. We are going to, again, take out the Omnisciences. Flusterstorm can come out. Flusterstorm doesn't have any targets. So we're definitely bringing in these 3. I kind of want to bring these Jaces in, just because it gives us a way. If they lock us out of the game with their enchantments, Jace gives us a way, an alternative win condition. So I think I'm going to cut 2 Spell Pierces for the Jaces. And we'll call it like that. That's one of the nice things about having Jace in your sideboard, is it gives you another way to win through some of the hate cards. Just like if you get to play against something like Mono Red Prison, if they lock you out under an Ensnaring Bridge, Jace is another win con. This hand is terrible. We cannot keep this one. This hand is also not good, but we will keep this one. The fact that we have Island and double cantrip. I'm going to put this Force of Will on the bottom. Alright, so we get to start with Preordain. We do find our land, and we do find a Pyroclasm. So I'm actually going to take both of these. This Brainstorm's nice. It'll let us get rid of this extra Gristlebrand. They have their Enchantress, but they only have 1 land. So I think we're gonna start with the Brainstorm. This is a pretty easy shuffle. We get to get rid of a Gristlebrand and an Emrakul. There's no reason to keep duplicates, and we get to shuffle them away. We may Pyroclasm next turn. So let's say that if they play like another Enchantress here, we're definitely Pyroclasming. Abundant Growth, sure. Sanctum. Enchantress Presence, sure. So now that they're going to start drawing a lot of cards here. I think our best way to win this game might be to play Jace. Because if you play Pyroclasm here, you're just going to slow him down a little bit. So I do think we are going to play the Jace here. We need to get something going. Well, there is a sneak attack. We know sneak attack is good. But we also need another land for it. We're going to have to save this Force of Will for something really powerful. Something like the Oblivion Ring, something like the Elephant Grass. If they could Living Wish here for like a choke. If they go to get a choke, we're going to have to counter that. But that's going to be what this Force of Will is going to be reserved for. Okay, so they got an Emrakul. Alright, so we get the brainstorm. So we do find some lands, which is good. So we can sneak attack and we can activate one time this turn. Okay, so we will Emrakul. So we're going to take them down some permanents here to hopefully slow them down enough that they're not going to get too much traction next turn. Because they were definitely setting up to have a really big turn next turn. Now they want to cast a choke. That we are going to force a will. And that should be the game. Alright, so our opponent scoops him up. Alright, so that was a good match. We are currently 1-1. That first round was a pretty rough loss against Grixis. I mean, they just had a million counter spells, which is one of our weaknesses. But round 2, we played against Enchantress there, and Enchantress is not a terribly bad matchup. Alright, round 3, here we go. This hand is a little rough. I think we're going to have to go to 6 on this one here, unfortunately. Yeah, like if this Lotus Petal was an actual land, I would keep this hand. But the fact that it's not, I mean, we are on the draw. We're going to have to spew off this Lotus Petal to preordain. I don't know, this would be an incredibly loose keep. I think we're going to throw this one back. There's too many things that can go wrong with this hand. This one we will keep. So we have Show and Tell, we have Emrakul, and we have 2 cantrips. So these cantrips just need to find us some lands. I'm going to bottom that Ponder. We definitely don't need another cantrip. Looks like we're playing against Grixis Delver again. So I think we're just going to take this Lotus Petal. Yeah, we don't really need the Gristlebrand. If we can Show and Tell this Emrakul into play, that's going to be good enough. Our opponent revealed a Tarfire, so this is likely Temur Delver. That's really the only version of Delver that plays Tarfire. But it looks like they kept the 1-lander, which is good news for us. So one thing we do want to be careful about is that we don't get stifled. So let's see. This hand is... This is interesting. I mean, this Flusterstorm could be really good, but we also need to find another land. So if we can do something like, so this turn we're not gonna crack the Scalding Tarn. So that means next turn, if we keep this, we'll get 2 of these cards. So we'll get, let's say, Flusterstorm and Brainstorm. We get to cast our Brainstorm and possibly shuffle away like an Emrakul. The fact that there's no lands here, but this could be good enough to keep. So I think I'm gonna keep this. There's no reason to show them that we have this Lotus Petal. Okay, now we can Brainstorm. Alright, so we found our lands. So I think this shuffle should be a pretty easy show and tell Emrakul. I think we're going to want all of our lands here. Like I said, there's a very high probability that they have a Stifle. And this will also leave us next turn. We'll be able to cast our show and tell next turn with counter magic backup. Alright, so if they want to fire off a Lightning Bolt, that's fine. This gives us an opportunity to sacrifice our lands here. We can go get Basic Mountain. And Basic Island. So now we don't have to worry about Wasteland either. Lightning Bolt is fine. We will go to 9. They can attack us with the Delver for take us down to 6. Alright, so we are going to Lotus Petal and cast a Show and Tell. Okay, so now we have a blocker for Delver. So we are going to have to start countering these burn spells. We're going to start with the Spell Pierce. Because Flusterstorm at least gives you 2 copies. So they can't daze your Flusterstorm. So we just need to really survive one turn here, because if we get to attack with this Tarmogoyf, we should be in okay shape. Or attack with this Emrakul to annihilate them. We will block Tarmogoyf. They could stifle our Annihilator trigger. There it is. So now we get the Flusterstorm, their Stifle. Oh, and they just scoop them up. That's actually a pretty... I think that's a pretty premature concession on their part. They have a draw. I don't think that stifles the end of the game. But that's okay. I'll take it. So this is a Delver matchup where Blood Moon actually could be good because they don't play... They play 0 basics. If you Blood Moon them, they are not casting any spells for the rest of the game outside of Lightning Bolts. So we may be bringing them in here. Jace is not good, and none of these other cards are going to be really good enough. Blood Moon's definitely on the fence. It might not come in, though. Pyroclasm is also worse here. Pyroclasm only hits Delver. Pyroclasm's never going to hit. Never going to hit a Tarmogoyf, and it's unlikely that it's going to hit a Nimble Mongoose, but it is possible. So I think what we're going to do here is I'm looking at the Defense Grid and the Blood Moon. Those are the first 2 cards that I'm looking at. Again, Omniscience is coming out. Unfortunately, we haven't played against any matchups where the Omniscience is actually good yet. I think we're going to take the same logic as the last time. I think we're just going to cut the Lotus Petals. And I think we'll probably just bring the Pyroclasms in here. So that gives us Blood Moon, Defense Grid, and Pyroclasm. This hand is... it's okay. I mean, we'll keep it on the back of the Brainstorm. This hand lets us fetch out 2 basic lands. So they're on Tropical Island to go. That means we're just going to play our island and we are going to pass. These decks usually play a lot of Spell Pierces, so we're not just going to run into a Spell Pierce here for no reason. Alright, so if they're not playing anything on their first 2 turns, their hand is probably just loaded with counter magic. So they want to Brainstorm. I think we're going to respond with our Brainstorm here. Okay, those are some good cards. Now we actually want all of these cards. I guess the one thing that we could look for is if we put, let's say we put back the 2 Force of Wills. If we put back the 2 Force of Wills, that's going to allow us to play Defense Grid next turn and have Flusterstorm to protect it. I think that's going to probably be the best way to go about this. Because these Force of Wills, we don't really want to, we're not going to want to pitch any of these other cards that are in our hand. And having Defense Grid is going to drastically change the way they have to play. So I think that's what we're going to do. I think we're going to put back the 2 Force of Wills. We're going to let them Brainstorm. We're going to keep those Force of Wills on top for right now. We might draw one of them. So they are going to surgical extraction our brainstorms. I mean, that's annoying, but... I mean, surgical extraction on brainstorm is not what that card is meant for. So if we respond to this, we can fetch. That'll be our stifle check. Alright, we're going to do that. We're going to see if they have the stifle. They do not. Okay, so this lets us... Now this lets us cast our brainstorm. So now we get to cast our brainstorm instead of letting them just surgical it for no reason. We'll just put the 2 lands back on top. So now we get a free shuffle. Like I said, this doesn't change our plan next turn. If we get to go City of Traders and play Defense Grid. I don't know, surgical extraction's fine, like if you're hitting our if you hit our show and tells, but I would not be surgicaling brainstorm there. Defense Grid is nice because it shuts down counter magic from their side. It almost forces them to have to use a Force of Will. Yeah, like that's totally fine because now next turn we can show and tell with Flusterstorm backup. So there's no reason for us to fight over that. I guess the only thing that kind of gets us in a pinch here is if they have a Wasteland. Okay, so they reveal the Spell Pierce. Okay, so I'm going to cast a Show and Tell. And they are going to Spell Pierce, which I will Flusterstorm. If they have a Daze, they're going to get us with a Daze. If they have another Spell Pierce, they're still going to get us with the Spell Pierce. So this is a fight that I think is fine to have. Next turn, we just get to play another Show and Tell. Yeah, see, like, that's totally fine. So they have 2 cards left in their hand. And we get to play another Show and Tell next turn. Alright, so we're just going to play Show and Tell again. Now they have Flusterstorm. That was really bad by me. I definitely should have played that Ancient Tomb. I kind of just had a little mental fart there. Alright, so let's ponder. We do not want any of these. We currently have no red source. Now we do. Alright, so I'm going to start with the Ponder. We do not need any of these cards. No, I lie. We're going to take the Show and Tell. This allows us to cast Show and Tell. They have a Force of Will, so they are currently out of cards. Alright. So let's see what they draw here. Next turn, we get to play Sneak Attack. So we're looking to draw a land here. We want to draw a fetch land or a volcanic island, because if we draw a red land, we can play Sneak Attack and activate it in the same turn. Defense Grid is not what we wanted. So unfortunately, that's actually going to kill us. Because if we tap this Ancient Tomb, we're just dead. Alright, well, our opponent got to squeak that one out. So we'll go to game 3. Yeah, looking back at it here, I don't think we're going to change anything. These Force of Wills are, like, as you've seen that game, the Force of Wills are a little bit awkward because you don't want to be, there aren't a whole lot of blue cards that you want to pitch in this matchup. Like, you're going to need your cantrips, you're going to need your counter magic to try and fight a battle. So, it might not be totally unreasonable to cut the Force of Wills here and put, like, the Lotus Petals back in, especially being on the play, and just play the attitude of the game where you're just going to force them to counter everything. These Force of Wills are also a lot worse with Defense Grid in your deck. So I think we're going to try that. This hand is good. We will keep this hand. Our opponent is on a mulligan to 6. And they are keeping their 6. So we are just going to pass with an island. So they just played Scalding Tarn and they didn't do anything. Alright, so we'll fetch and we'll see if they have a Stifle. They do not have a Stifle. So if they don't have the Stifle, I kind of just want to get an island here. Because getting an island lets us play Defense Grid, and now we don't have to worry about Wasteland. Okay, so they're going to Force of Will the Defense Grid. I will Flusterstorm this. so defense grid is in the house. This at least, so now, if we can draw a land this next turn, this will free up our show and tell. That's okay. Our opponent is surgicaling our Flusterstorm. I mean, my guess is maybe they're doing this just to look at our hand. Sylvan Library is perfectly okay. We missed on our land, so we're going to play our Brainstorm. We found a basic mountain. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the 2 Gristlebrands back on top. And then next turn we get to show and tell. So presumably what they're going to do here is they're going to play library and they're going to look for a land and a counterspell, because now they know we have show and tell online next turn. Which all it's going to do is force them to hold up 3 mana for the rest of the game. Yeah, so that if they're holding up 3 mana, that means they probably either have a Force of Will or a Spell Pierce, which we're not going to play into, because they eventually have to tap mana for something. So we do have one more dead draw step on the top of our deck, as we know there's another Gristlebrand there. Our opponent decided to take 4 damage. That gives them a Scalding Tarn, so now they can shuffle the top of their deck. But they are still very far away from actually killing us. This is just one of the things about Delver in general, is you really need to... You can have all the counter magic in the world, but you need to have a clock to go along with it. Alright, so we will play this Brainstorm. We did find a land. So this will allow us to shuffle away a Gristlebrand. And I'm kind of looking at Preordain here. So if we put Preordain back, we can shuffle with Scalding Tarn. That leaves our hand of double Show and Tell and a Sneak Attack. So we're just going to get to play one giant threat every turn for the next couple of turns. So I don't think we're going to have the real need for this Preordain right now. I mean, we could just not play the Show and Tell this turn, because all we're doing is wasting our opponent's mana. Because like I said, they eventually have to start playing something. Alright, what the heck? We'll start jamming now. Sure. This just forces them to have a counterspell every turn for the next 3 turns in a row. That's actually really annoying. Okay, so they have Surgical on our show and tells, and they get the Wasteland or Volcanic Island. So now we're going to be a mana short of the sneak attack. Okay, so they're playing Tarmogoyf, so that means they don't have counter spell protection up right now. We drew a Lotus Petal, so this lets us play our sneak attack. And then next turn we get the Emrakul them. And our opponent is currently sitting at 1, so their fetch lands are currently turned off. And our opponent scoops them up. Alright, so we are currently 2-1. We had a loss to Grixis Delver, and then we had a win against Enchantress, and a win against Rug Delver. Rug Delver can typically be a very difficult matchup. I mean, they play Force of Will, Daze, Spell Pierce, and Wasteland and Stifle all in their main deck, which is all very good interaction against you. And then after board, they get to bring in Pyroblast, so that is typically a very hard matchup. Alright, match number 4, we will be on the play. This hand is fine. So we just get the lead on island to go here. Alright, so this is Mono Red Storm. Yeah, that's the only card that I know of that plays this. The only deck that I know that plays this card. So we're just gonna have to prepare for like we're playing against a Storm matchup here. Alright, so we get the Brainstorm. This is actually very good. So we just get to show and tell now. The cards we're putting back just really don't matter, because we're going to be drawing with Gristlebrand anyway. So we get to put in Gristlebrand. Get the draw 7. So the one thing we do get to think about here is if we get our next draw 7, if we can hit something like Lotus Petal Spell Pierce. That's really our only reason if we would want to draw now versus if we would want to wait. So I think I am going to do it now just in case we hit it. We found the Lotus Petal. And then we also found a second Force of Will. So that's as far as we can go. We get to go do some discarding. We do get to discard a pile of lands here. We have an extra Gristlebrand. Discard this other fetch land. So we want 2 Force of Wills. We want 2 blue cards. So we're safe to discard the Show and Tell. And probably the City of Traders. Yeah, so this is 2 blue. We get to keep Sneak Attack, Emrakul. Yeah, well, last card's going to be City here. Alright, so we have double Force of Will protection. And then next turn, we get to play our Sneak Attack. And our opponent scoops them up. Sometimes Sneak and Show is that easy. Alright, so we're playing against Storm. So this deck's win conditions are either Grape Shot or Empty the Warrens. So we're going to bring in Pyroclasm. And we're going to bring in Echoing Truth. Those are at least our anti-Empty the Warrens cards. We don't want Blood Moon. We don't want Jace. Abraid's not going to be good enough. Neither is Defense Grid. Okay, so the rest of these cards don't matter. Again, we will take out our 2 Omniscience. And we get to make 1 more cut. I mean, we might just take this Echoing Truth out. It might not be good enough. We want all of our counter magic. It's either we cut an Echoing Truth or we cut a Sneak Attack. I think we'll cut the Sneak Attack. Echoing Truth is always just nice in case your opponent plays God knows what in their sideboard. They could play any number of random cards that can beat you. Like I said, for all we know, our opponent could sideboard in an Ensnaring Bridge. So Echoing Truth is always a nice safety valve to have in your deck post sideboard. It's not very often that the card is going to be completely dead. And if you draw it, it's only 1 card. You can always brainstorm it away. We will keep this hand. Again, we're keeping it off the back of the Brainstorm. Our opponent's just firing off a main phase Brainstorm here, which means they could be very close to killing us. So this is not Mono Red Storm. I mean, I guess our opponent could be playing something like Blue-Red Painter. I mean, the Ruby Medallion makes that not as good, so... No, it looks like some kind of Storm deck. Alright, so they are casting Reforge the Soul. Alright, so this is a Wheel of Fortune. I guess we're going to Flusterstorm this. Oops. Excuse this window, folks. This is our constant reminder that we are supposed to update our windows because they did not do it when they built our PC. Ironically, it always comes up when we're streaming, so we're recording a video. So let's continue with our match here. Alright, so we are currently Flusterstorming this Reforge the Soul. They cannot pay for it. It looks like that's all they had going on. Alright, so we get the Brainstorm. We can definitely get rid of these lands. Really doesn't matter which ones. Play our Volcanic Islands. Or play our Scalding Tarn, rather. Yeah, and we can Ponder. There's no real downside to not casting this Ponder. We have a Force of Will still, and we have Show and Tell for next turn. Yeah, these cards are all fine. I'm actually going to play this Lotus Petal. This will let us represent Spell Pierce or another Flusterstorm. Rite of Flame is fine. Seething Song. I mean, I think we're just going to let the Seething Song resolve. Even if they play Empty the Warrens, we don't care. What is this card? Until the end of turn, whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell, that player copies it, and you may choose a new target for that copy. So I guess this is what we're looking to counter. I mean, our opponent can Grape Shot us here, but that's fine. Alright, so they do not have it. Alright, so this is nice and easy. We just get to Show and Tell and put our Emrakul into play. I mean, they could Pyroblast us, I guess. If they have Pyroblast. Respond with the Brainstorm. Alright, and it is your turn, my friend. Alright, our opponent is taking their good old time here. I would recommend a right click and a concede, because I find it incredibly hard to believe that you're going to get out of this. Ponder. Ponder is A-OK. I'm not even quite sure what our opponent's really looking for here. I mean, there's no way you're winning from this point. Even if you find a couple cantrips that chain together, like, you can Rite of Flame, Seething Song. You don't have enough cards in your hand for that. Next turn, you know you're getting annihilated. You know you're going to be dropping. You're going to be dropping all 3 of your lands. So you're not going to have any lands to even operate next turn. Something like a Burning Wish isn't really going to help them. So I really don't know what our opponent's even looking for here. Either that or they just feel like they want to take away a little bit of our life and make us wait. I kind of feel like that's what's going on here. I feel like our opponent's being a little salty and they want to make us wait for our win. That is unfortunately one thing you do run into pretty frequently here online. It's kind of why I popped open my chat window here. I was waiting for somebody to make a comment. I mean, they've only been looking at this ponder for the last 3 minutes. So, anyway, while we're hanging out here, I might as well take a peek here over at our Legacy metagame. Like I said, as I do with my other videos, I always like to keep an update, check up on this Legacy challenge from the most recent week to see what is going on. Our opponent decided they finally wanted to come back. Cast a Rite of Flame, okay. Burning Wish, okay. I mean, they only have 2 mana. Burning Wish for a ponder, sure. I mean, yep, thank you for wasting my time. Yeah, see, that's all that was. That's totally uncalled for and completely unnecessary if you're a Magic Online player. When all you're doing is trying to time out your opponent and make them waste their time, like, it's just really, really more obnoxious than anything. I promise you I will be attacking with my Emrakul. Now they decide they want to concede. Okay. Alright, so we are currently 3-1. We are going into our last round here. We are currently looking at a 4-1 if we win, a 3-2 if we lose. I mean, worst case, if we lose, we still get a break even in our league, but ideally we are trying to get a win here and take home a little bit of prize. So hopefully we get a good matchup here in the last round. So we're looking for something easy, nice and easy. If we run into Elves, Elves is one of your best matchups for this deck. Elves, Burn, those are the easy ones. The blue decks are the ones that can be a little bit tough. I mean, as you've seen in that first round, we had outs to win that game, but we fell a little bit short. But we also got to beat another Delver deck in round 3, so the matchups are definitely winnable, but they're a little tough, and they're definitely a lot closer. But anyway, while we're hanging out here, so let's check out this last Legacy Challenge. We currently have a Miracles deck that was the 7-0. You had Reanimator, Eldrazi Post, a couple of Grixis controls that were the 5-2s, and then, or I'm sorry, the 6-1s, and then you had some smattering of the 5-2s that were in the top 8. So most of these are pretty much the decks that you expect to see at any given Legacy tournament at this point. Legacy and Grixis control and Miracles have both proven to be two of the best decks in the format. They are excellent control decks, and people always love playing control. That is also, those two decks alone are a reason why Sneak and Show is actually a reasonable choice right now. Sneak and Show is pretty good against the control decks. That's actually one of the reasons why this Eldrazi Post deck continues to put up results, is because Eldrazi Post is also good against the control decks. Alright, so we are on the play, but unfortunately this hand is going to be a mulligan. We do not have any lands. This hand is better. We will keep this one. We have 4 mana. We have a Brainstorm, Gristlebrand, and now a Sneak Attack, so we will keep both of these. Our opponent is also on a mulligan to 6. So we do have a turn 2 Sneak Attack. At this point, I am not going to cast this Brainstorm yet. Let's see what our opponent is playing, and that could determine what we want to do here on our next turn. Alright, looks like we have another Enchantress player, which is good news for us. So that being said, we are just going to slam a turn 2 Sneak Attack. One reason why there's a lot of Enchantress online is this is actually a very cheap deck to build. I've actually been running into this a lot recently. We were playing our Sneak and Show, or Blue-Black Death Shadow deck, and we definitely ran into this matchup a couple of times. Alright, so we're going to need this Brainstorm to find us a red source, hopefully. Okay, so we did find it. Alright, so this will allow us to shuffle away Spell Pierce and the land. We can Flooded Strand, crack our Flooded Strand. We will get that Volcanic Island back. I would like to activate my Sneak Attack and put in this Gristlebrand. We will draw 7 cards. We will draw another 7. If we get the... We're going to draw another 7 because if we hit a Lotus Petal, the game is over. We did not hit a Lotus Petal, so our opponent will get another turn. Okay, so we get to attack with our Gristlebrand. We get to go back to 10, And we get to decide if we want to draw any more cards here. So we are going to keep we have found all 4 of our Force of Wills. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep nothing but Force of Wills and blue cards. So that way it is impossible for us to lose this game. So we'll keep 4 Force of Wills. Or I'm sorry, we'll keep 3. We'll keep 3 Force of Wills, 3 blue cards, and the Emrakul to pitch. So there's no reason for us to draw with Gristlebrand here. There's no way we're losing this game. Not when we have the ability to counter 3 cards out of them next turn. And we already have the Emrakul to annihilate their board. Utopia Sprawl is perfectly fine. Mary's Guile is something we do not care about. Sterling Grove gives everything Shroud. Sacrifice Sterling Grove, search your library for an enchantment card, reveal that card, and then put it on top of your library. So we do not care about Sterling Grove either. If Sterling Grove went to their hand, it might be a different story, but the fact that it goes on the top of their deck, it doesn't matter. Because they're going to have to cast whatever they find with the Sterling Grove. Vanishing Light. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so they have an Elephant Grass. Like, we can actually let this Elephant Grass resolve. We just don't. We have the extra mana that we can pay for it. So we don't even need to counter this. If we had a Gristlebrand, we would need to. So now we just get to put Emrakul into play. And we have an easy game. And our opponent scoops him up. Okay. So that was an easy game 1. Game 2 here. Last time, I believe we brought in the 2 Pyroclasms and the Echoing Truth. And we also brought in the 2 Jace. So that will be our same plan. We get to cut the Omniscience. Unfortunately, this league has been a bad showing for Omniscience. Normally you do want these in your deck, but so far we've actually cut the Omniscience in every matchup because we have not had a use for them as far as this league is concerned. So, alright, so we also get to cut Flusterstorm. And I think last time we cut 2 Spell Pierce. I mean, we might want to keep the Spell Pierces in. They're actually, I think that's what I cut last time, and that's probably just wrong. So we'll keep the 2 Spell Pierce in, and I'm actually going to cut 2 Preordain this time. Yeah, I'm pretty sure last time I cut 2 Spell Pierce, which is definitely incorrect. Alright, we are going to keep this hand. We definitely need some help from this preordain. But we're on the draw. Alright, so we have Brainstorm and a land. I think we want both of these. Because next turn we get the Brainstorm and shuffle away this extra sneak attack. And the fact that we have the sneak attack makes me less inclined to want to just jam the show and tell. Because I know, as we seen the first time, yeah, rest in peace is fine. We don't care about rest in peace. The first time we seen when our opponent had the Banishing Light, we got the cast show and tell, and our opponent just got the Banishing Light whatever we put into play. So that is one reason to be a little more cautious about casting show and tell. Alright, so we get to shuffle away one sneak attack. And it might be Jace. I don't think we're going to need the Jace this game. Not from the way this board currently stands. So I think that's a pretty safe shuffle. Alright, so this is going to allow us to play our sneak attack next turn. Or our show and tell. Let's see what our opponent does. I will definitely Spell Pierce this. This is just going to get our opponent an Enchantress. Okay, Caracas is good from their end. Alright, so that being said, I think we're just going to play the sneak attack. So we are going to be in really good shape, assuming our opponent does not have like a disenchant effect. And if they do, it's hopefully not the end of the world. The one thing that's nice about sneak attack is it also lets you beat Caracas if you have an Emrakul. We do not currently have the Emrakul, but at least Gristlebrand will come into play and let us draw a bunch of cards. So hopefully we can find it. Elephant Grass is good. Okay, so they have an Enchantress. And that's all they have. Okay, so we do get to do some things here. So we get to activate our sneak attack and put in a Gristlebrand. We will get to draw some cards. Alright, so we did find our Emrakul. So that being said, we can sneak attack and activate for 1 red, and then we can pay 2 for the grass, so we can still attack with Emrakul. So that is going to be our plan. And even with the Caracas in play, our opponent is going to be forced to either bounce it before we attack, or if they're going to wait till after we attack, they're still going to have to annihilate 6 from the Emrakul trigger. Alright, so they do want to bounce our Emrakul, which is fine. We will just activate our sneak attack again before we go to our attacks. Emrakul gets to come back in. Attack, pay for 2 for the grass. Now they must annihilate. Okay, so they're going to take 15 and go down to 3. And at this point, there's no reason for us to draw with Gristlebrand. We already have an Emrakul and another Gristlebrand in our hand, so we're not really drawing to look for any more. And then we get to go to our end step, do a little bit of discarding. We can discard our lands and these extra Gristlebrands. And that's going to be the match. Alright, so we had a nice little 4-1 showing here with Sneak and Show. If you are still sticking around, I do want to say thank you very much. We are going to be doing a bunch of legacy content on this channel. I will also be sprinkling in some modern, but I have currently been enjoying the legacy format, so that's where I've been kind of sticking for the time being. But if you do like the channel, please remember, give us a like, give us a subscribe, and help us out. But thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening, and I appreciate you for watching. Good night.